Hello art stars, today we have a really fun lesson planned for you. We're going to go and raid the kitchen to make our own clay and our own vase sculptures. But before we get started, I want everyone to open up your PDF. And we've got a really amazing artist of inspiration today. Her name is Betty Woodman and she's a ceramicist. She works with sculpture and painting, and she always introduces this sort of juxtaposition between 3D things and 2D things. And I thought it'd be fun to look at this because up to now we've been working on making something that is flat look really 3D. Her approach is the opposite. So she takes things that are very three-dimensional, that have a lot of volume to them, and then paints very flat so that it would look almost like a cartoon. And she takes a lot of inspiration from Cubism. If you've never heard of Cubism before, it's a bit like Picasso. He was a big cubist. And I think when you look at the images of her vases, you can really see that influence. I left you 2 links there if you want to find out more about her life and her work. She's got a fascinating scope of work. But I've picked a few images today to focus our inspiration. And you'll look, she also does this juxtaposition. The final picture is one where the front is very colorful and the back tells a completely different story, monochrome. So I want you to think about all of those things when you're thinking about your vase and what elements you're going to add to it to decorate it. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to shift you over here to my table. And today I'm standing for you because it'll be easier to mix this. So we have got here a cup of flour. And I've got a little bit extra in my cup just in case I need it. We've got half a cup of salt, which we're going to add in. I've got my trusty stick here. I didn't have a rolling pin, so I thought I'd use a stick, and I'm going to use it both to mix my ingredients together and to roll out my dough later. Lovely. Now we've mixed our dry ingredients. I'm going to measure out another half a cup of water. There we go. And you're going to pour it in slowly and mix it in a bit. Because if you add it all at once and it was too much water, it'll be really runny and sticky. So it's better to go in little increments. And you might want to ask an adult to help you measure out your ingredients. There we go. That's slowly becoming something. And I thought it's nice to take full advantage of the fact that we're home, because this isn't necessarily something we could achieve in one day if we were in the Rosetta studio. There we go. So sometimes being at home isn't a disadvantage, it can be an advantage as well. And I think this one is one that you can do over and over again. You can do mini sculptures, you can do slightly bigger ones, but do remember that the size of your sculpture is gonna affect how long it takes in the oven later. So just like clay, we're gonna have to fire, which you call in ceramics, or bake our clay. And whereas when you're working with ceramics, they're kilns, they're ovens that reach incredibly high temperatures. With our dough, we just want it to slowly dehydrate. And that's what's going to give it a nice sturdiness. So you want to mix this in for a good 5 minutes. And if your dough's feeling really sticky, you can add a little bit more flour. Just sprinkle a little bit at a time and knead it in. Or same with water, if it's looking a little bit crackly. We'll see how this one does. This is looking pretty good. And if you want to make a bigger piece, or maybe mom or dad want to join in and make another piece as well, just double the recipe. The recipe's on your PDF. And you can times it by 2 or 3 if you've got a lot of people making sculptures. Now this is looking pretty good. I might add a tiny sprinkle of water, because if you see when I push it, my dough's a little bit crackly. It might just be that it needs a bit more kneading, but I suspect it needs a teeny tiny bit more water, just a few drops. So we're gonna pour some on here. And very carefully pour just a little bit to wet it. Oh yeah. Lovely. So now I'm gonna get my bowl out of the way. All my extra bits. You'll notice next to my stick, I also have a little skewer. This is just to help you with maybe putting in some texture, some detailing, cutting out some bits of dough. So I'm gonna go ahead and split this in 2 once I'm done kneading it in. That's looking almost complete. Oh, beautiful. Okay, and just take your hands, and there we go, split into 2. I'm gonna put 1/2 aside, and 1/2 we're gonna roll into a bowl. And much like you would start a pinch pot, if we were doing some pottery, some ceramics, you're gonna go ahead and stick your thumb in the middle, and then you start pressing and rolling it. And think about the shape you want to create. So I think I want mine to have a very fat bottom and then a very narrow top. We'll see what we can achieve here. And try and make this as uniform as possible. Because if everything is the same thickness, it's gonna cook a lot better. And you see, I'm just pinching very, very softly. If you pinch too hard, it might go a bit thin, and then you have to start over again and re-roll it. And so to get this a little bit narrower, I pull my fingers like this so that it starts creating that sort of rounded shape a bit. And I'm going a bit thinner on one side than another here. But we want it still to have a bit of an organic movement to it, so I don't mind it being slightly taller on one side than another. Just make sure you keep feeling out that everything's kind of the same thickness. Always turning it around. lovely. This is almost there. I can feel that this side's a little bit fatter, so I'm gonna see if I can slowly create more of a rounded shape here. Oh yeah. All right. We're perhaps going to raise this up a little bit. Yeah, I like that. Give it a little pinch up. Okay, so there we've got the base of our vase. So I'm going to put that down and press very, very, very gently, just a little bit, to give it a bit of a flat bottom so it can sit nicely, and then gently lift it again, just to make sure it's not stuck on there. That you don't break it once you're lifting it and you've got all your beautiful decorations on it. Okay. That's a shape I'm very happy with, so I'm going to set this aside here and bring in the rest of my dough. Now the rest of my dough, I think I want flat, because I really like those kind of jutting little structures that she adds, all these little geometric kind of shapes. So you can use a rolling pin, or like me, if you don't own a rolling pin, you can just use any old stick you find lying around. And again, you don't press too hard. Oh, here, I'm aiming my sculpture on the way here. I'm just gonna lift this guy and move him. There we go. So be sure to go both ways. And again, you don't want it to be too thin or too thick. If it's too thick, it's going to be in our oven a long time. And if it's too thin, it might break. And if it breaks, it's okay, just roll it up again and start that bit over. It's sometimes interesting to see how far you can push. I'm going to roll with just a little bit more pressure now. Only ever so slightly, because we don't want it to become bigger in some bits than in others. But this is rolling out very nicely. I'm really happy with the consistency of my dough. It's not cracking, but it's not sticking to my hands either. Okay, just a little bit thinner. It's a mixture between like making cookies and making art. And I love when food and art come together. I think it's really fun dipping into the kitchen and thinking about those ingredients in a different way. You can use a lot of what's in your kitchen to create watercolors as well. Make your own natural dyes. Okay, once more over here just to even it out. And that's looking pretty even to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and maybe do like a little wavy pattern here. And I'm gonna cut this piece and then reform it a bit. Oh, lovely. Always working with this super gently so that your pieces don't break. And again, not trying to affect the thickness so much so that all of these pieces stay the same thickness. And I'm going to bring my water back in and my vase. And because of the surface I have, it's very sort of non-porous. It's sticking a lot. And you can always use a little bit of parchment paper or pick up wooden cutting board and put your pieces there if you don't want to be like, I can feel when I lift it, it's pulling a little bit. We'll just be careful, but it's something to keep in mind. So you're going to dip your finger in the water and we're going to put it on the edge here of the piece we want to connect. And then on the part where you want to connect it. So I kind of want it halfway up here. And then you can very patiently start putting these together. And that water is just going to help it get a bit sticky. And let me see if I can move this here to show you. You want to use your finger to kind of mix in where the two lines meet so that they disappear. Very gently though. Lovely. I'm just going to shape a little bit more here. Then I think I'm going to add maybe 2 little pieces to go on here. So maybe we want something following a similar line, and you can use half pressure here to kind of draw out your piece. I like that. It's like a little heart ear piece. So I think ears sometimes look a little bit like weird hearts. There we go. Lovely. I'm just going to smooth my edges out here because as you can see from cutting it, it's a bit rough. So just slowly, almost like caressing the sides and pushing very, very gently. Okay, I'm going to make this slightly flatter so that I can attach the shape. Dip the finger in water again. Dip my sculpture. And attach. So I'm going to start with one side first, smoothing out the edge with my finger. Trying to be super gentle. Now we're going to do this side. If you find like I can feel this one's getting a bit thin here, you can pinch a little bit of your dough and add that in. I really like how that's looking. And then we're gonna do one more like that on this side, I think. So maybe this one has like a loppier side, and then a smaller one. If you've got stuff that is sort of like this, where this part is a lot taller than this, I'm always going to want to point the bigger part towards the bottom, because if I do it this way, the weight of it might just tear it off my pot. And you've got to keep that in mind when you're thinking about the shapes you're creating, because there is a limit to the dough's stability. It's not quite as stiff as working with clay. So it's good to always keep in mind the limits of our materials. Like, you don't want to do something that is very long and very narrow, because it might just start falling and flopping over. And it'd be a tragedy after you've put in all the effort to have it fall sideways on you. Okay, that's my second ear. There we go. So again, a little bit of water. A little bit of water here. And twist it around. Smaller part at the top. And again, pick one side and you start making the sides disappear. Little caresses into the seam of your pieces. Let me see if I can move this around. Oh. Okay, so you can see it here. And again, I feel like here in the middle is a little bit weak, so I'm gonna add a little pinch more of clay. This backside's struggling a little bit, so I'm just gonna prop him back up, because I think my clay is a little bit on the runny side. Let's see. There we go. And so I might just add one more piece maybe that connects from here to here. Again, smoothing out our edges. Lovely. If you feel it's starting to get a little bit resistant, you can dip your finger in the water and again caress the edge so it smooths out. Nice, I love that. And I think it's gonna come, yeah. So we're gonna add a little bit more water here and stick it to this side. And then I think I'm going to add a little bit here. Make this go a bit cross-eyed here. I don't want to block your view. And now I'm just going to very gently try and lift this up. Again, if you can get a cutting board or something to help it not stick, I'm going to do a little bit of reshaping here, just because I can feel it compressing and getting a bit heavier. Oh, there we go. there we have it. And it's going to be a little bit floppy, so be very gentle. But at this point, we are ready to bake. So you want to ask an adult who is in your company or joining you to preheat your oven. I've got a bit of dough left over here. I might use it for a second sculpture. And you're going to preheat your oven to 120 Celsius. And then depending on the size, like I reckon this one will probably take an hour to cook. I'm going to shove it in my oven and let you know how it goes. Keep an eye on it because it's so subjective. Completely depends on the thickness and the size of your sculpture. So just keep a close eye on it. Keep checking on it. You want it to get nice and sturdy. So by the time you take it out, this should all be static and not kind of a bit melty like it is right now. And there's just a little bit of weight here. So I'm just going to reshape here quickly. You can always go in and adjust more until you're ready to put in the oven. So I'd love for you to get up to this point. And then we're going to have a little conversation, check in how you're doing in the Zoom session. And then you can pop them in the oven. And when they're ready, we can get back to painting. So I'll show you mine once it's ready in a picture in the PDF. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing your creations. One final thing is when you're ready to paint, look at the vibrant colors that Betty uses and those really sort of primitive shapes that are very flat. Think almost about how you could turn your sculpture into a 2D cartoon. Okay, I'll leave you with that thought and I will see you later in the Zoom session. Okay, bye Art Stars.